After exploring letting go, it's natural to ask, what was it that needed letting go in the first place? And often, that's where the ego comes in. So, what is the ego really? The ego is not something separate from you, it's a function of the mind. It's the part of awareness that learned how to navigate the world through protection, comparison, and control. It's the voice that asks, am I safe? Am I enough? How do I avoid pain? And noticing that already softens it. Because the ego isn't who you are, it's something you learned. Over time, experiences leave impressions. Those impressions become beliefs. And eventually, those beliefs shape behavior. That behavior can begin to feel like identity. So the ego isn't your true self. It's more like a mask that once helped you belong, adapt, or survive. And most of us don't realize we're wearing it until it starts to feel heavy. Which is why the ego is often misunderstood. It's not an enemy. It served a purpose, especially earlier in life. It helped you to make sense of the world. It helped you to protect yourself when you didn't feel safe yet. The problem isn't that the ego exists. The problem is when it believes it has to stay in charge. The problem isn't that the ego exists. The problem is when it believes it has to stay in charge. Because the ego leads with fear. Awareness leads with trust. And that difference changes everything. The ego forms quietly through repetition. Moments when you felt rejected. Moments when you learned to perform, please, hide, or strive. Moments when you unconsciously decided, I need to be a certain way to be accepted. So the mind adapted. It learned control. It learned comparison. It learned effort. And it learned vigilance. None of this was wrong. It was intelligent. But those same strategies can begin to limit you when growth asks for softness instead. And you'll often notice the ego most clearly in relationships. It showed up as defensiveness, as fear of vulnerability, as needing reassurance or certainty. In work or business, it can sound like pressure. I should be further ahead. I can't slow down. My worth depends on results. And internally, it often feels like tension, a subtle sense of bracing against life. The ego always reacts to the idea of loss or lack, which is why trying to fight the ego doesn't work. Resistance actually strengthens it. Judgment feeds it. Each time you pause instead of react, each time you notice a pattern without identifying with it, the ego loosens its grip. This is where meditation becomes powerful. Not because it removes the ego, but because it creates space around it. And in that space, something else becomes clearer. Confidence. True confidence doesn't look like ego. Ego needs to prove. Confidence doesn't. Ego seeks validation. Confidence is settled. Confidence comes from alignment, from knowing yourself beyond the mask. And when confidence is present, the ego no longer needs to shout. This is where the ego becomes useful again. A softened ego can help you navigate the physical world, set boundaries, take inspired action, express individuality. But it no longer defines you. Awareness leads, the ego assists. And when that shift happens, you feel it. less tension in the body, less mental noise, less need to defend, explain, or control. Your response, you respond instead of react. You listen more deeply. You feel safer being yourself. Life begins to feel less confrontational and more cooperative. So how do we soften the ego? Not by trying to get rid of it, but by understanding it through stillness, through curiosity, through compassion, through noticing sensation in the body, through allowing emotion to move without, through stillness, through curiosity, through compassion, through noticing sensations in the body, through allowing emotion to move without labeling them as problems. Each moment of presence tells the ego, you don't have to protect me right now. And when the ego feels safe enough to relax, alignment returns naturally. You don't outgrow the ego by fighting it. You outgrow it by no longer needing it to keep you safe. And in that softness, something deeper begins to lead. If you want to dive deeper into spirituality, check out my book, Walk in Higher Vibration, and click the link in the description.